Good morning. Sorry guys, I was having some technical difficulties. I decided to go live from the church this morning just to kind of get us back in the swing of things, and it seems like it's a good thing I did because I have some friends here with me this morning. But then I couldn't get the computer figured out and had to go to the phone. Nothing like technical difficulties when you are getting ready to do something that you're a little nervous about and you want to have good concentration and focus for. So nothing like that to kind of throw you off center for a second. So I will give just a minute for people to see that I did make it on this week, just a few minutes late. Hi, Sharon. I'm going to try to watch the comments as I go. That'll be a fun thing. Maybe I can do some interaction. And then this morning, like I said, we have a few friends who are a week early for back in session live classes here at Unity of Springfield. So that is a good thing to let everyone reminder that starting next week, we are going to be fully live back at the church for class, as well as doing, we're going to continue to do the live stream. We recognize that sometimes you just don't feel well and you need to stay home, but you still want to be part of the community here at Unity of Springfield. We also know that some of you are not in our physical area, but you really like to join with the energy here, and we so appreciate that as well. Good morning, James. Good morning, Jolynn. Hi, Brandy. So we are trying to successfully transition into this hybrid of in-person and online at the same time. You guys at home can't see, but my friends who showed up here today are getting to see a crazy setup with, it wasn't set up for live, so I'm gonna try to engage with everyone, and it's gonna test my skills, and it's a good thing. All right, so hoping that everyone can hear me and see me now, since we're getting some comments and some good mornings. So,
do the comments?
oh, you can. Mary might answer comments if I don't catch them, because she's sitting here with us. So we will just be an interactive community this morning, and that is exciting. Okay. So let's open this morning with kind of a prayer and affirmation. If you choose to do so, you can close your eyes. Take a deep breath. I sit here peacefully in my knowing of one energy, one source, one great love. I know that this single source of life is full, complete, abundant, benevolent, supportive, and expansive. Everywhere I look, I see abundance. Everywhere I look, I see prosperity. Everywhere I look, I see expansion. And as I see without, I look within. And I know that as one with the universe, everything about me is prosperous, abundant, and expansive. With deep gratitude, I recognize there is always more than enough, and I am connected to the generous nature of Christ's mind. I attract so much good that I share it with those around me, multiplying the good in their lives, in our community, in our world. I am abundance. I am prosperity. I am expansion. I am generosity. This is a beautiful truth of the universe, and so we say, Amen. So, good morning, Peggy. I see you on there. So this book that I chose for this week is called Love, Let Go. It's by Laura Trox and Amelia Campbell. And it details the events that led up to the Love, Let Go campaign for the Lasalle Street Church in Chicago. And good morning, Susan. And this story began, I'm going to kind of go through the story of what happened with this church. So Lasalle Street Church in Chicago, they consider themselves a small church. At the time of this event, They had a little over 300 congregants that were attending regularly. And over the years, they had really had a passion for creating things within their community that would help sustain people. So they had a lot of mission programs and just different things that the church supported and different people in the church had started that were to uplift their community and really get help to especially some of the low income individuals that had lived in their area. So what had happened in the 70s is the church had an opportunity to invest in a real estate program, and this program would provide low-income housing to the neighborhood. And it was a special project in that it created, it was called Atrium Gardens, and it was this beautiful building, and the goal was to have low-income housing for individuals, but they didn't want it to just be a low-income housing building, because they had seen how that had turned out in other areas, that if it was an only low-income building, that sometimes the upkeep didn't happen and things, people hadn't maybe a negative perception of that area. So this project created a building where a portion of the units were low income and the other portion were at market price. And no one would really know who was paying full price rent and who wasn't within the building. And it was kind of an experiment to see if that made a difference. And so this building was built. There were several churches in the area that were approached to be part of this investment, and they had a really small portion. I believe it was like $2,000 per congregation that they put in to make this project happen. And there were some government grants and things that went into play with that as well. So fast forward 35 years later, and some of the terms of this project had been they were set to expire at 35 years. So that was the agreement, was this project was going to go on as is, as kind of a social experiment for this length of time. And then at that time, everyone who was involved would have the option to sell, and there would be an option to change that property to something different if need be. And so that's what happened, is those who were able to exercise their right to do something different with the property decided to do so. But in order to do that, they had to pay out the original investors, and they had to pay them out with interest and at fair market price for the current state of affairs. And what that equaled was, for Lasalle Street Church, their initial investment in the 1970s of less than $5,000 was a $1.5 million payout. Wow. from this project. Wow. So, the church board became really excited about that, of course, when they saw that dollar amount, and they started dreaming and thinking of all the ways that the ministry needed to use that money. And they pointed out that this $1.5 million was about double their previous annual year budget for the church. So it was more money than the church had seen coming and going in quite some time. And they had been facing a large deficit. They had been in a place where they were discussing possible staffing cuts or salary cuts because they didn't know if they were going to be able to make budget. They were about $50,000 in the red. And so there became some discussion about using the money for that. They had also, we don't so much have to deal with parking issues here in the Springfield area, but in Chicago, parking is a big deal, and they had lost access to a parking structure that had gone private or something, and so they could no longer park in that structure when they were attending church, and so parking had become an issue, and there were a lot of people wanting them to build a parking lot and or a parking garage. And so they really started to talk about using the money to alleviate the shortage. Maybe they did need to build a parking lot. They wanted to maintain their staff. There were building repairs that had gone ignored because of budget shortfalls and things like that. And they found themselves in really heated discussion about past financial decisions, about what the future of the ministry needed to look like, and realized after a time that there were really strong opinions on either side, and a few of them started to get really discouraged because what should have been this exciting windfall where there was joy in, oh, there's more than enough and there's this money, had led to a lot of hard feelings and disagreements between people, and how are we going to use the money. And it was still just within the board at that point because they wanted to have a little bit of a plan before they went to the congregation. So they started to explore, they didn't like that it was creating such frustration and discontent to have this money. And so they started thinking, we really need to get clear in what we're going to do and how we feel about this money. And so after a lot of discussion, they finally agreed, the whole board agreed, that the money shouldn't be used to fill the budget deficit, that they had a budget and they should stick with that budget. And this money had come from a project that supported their mission of uplifting the people in their community and making life better for those in their area. And so they felt like using the money just to build a parking garage or to fill in the budget and then just, we all know how that goes when you get extra money and you use it to fill in your budget, and then poof, the next thing you know, it's been used up and it's gone. And so that was their worry. And so they said, you know what, we really feel like this money, that's where it came from. It's a massive return on investment for what we did in that project, and we feel like that's what we should do with this money moving forward. And so someone raised the idea that, as a church, they're always encouraging people to tithe 10% and to make sure that when you have something like that come into your life, that you're giving back a portion in gratitude to this book. It is more traditional Christian beliefs. And so, the strict version of tithing the 10%. And that was an interesting conversation because it stated that, there was a couple of board members that said, no, wait, we're a church. We ask for the tithe. We don't give the tithe. And so it created a huge conversation where others were saying, but we want to be the example that we want to see in the world. And we are always encouraging our congregants to do this. So why would we not then in turn, do that with this money? And so ultimately, what they decided was that it would be a great way to practice what they preach. And everyone got on board with this idea that 10% of the money should go to God's work. So then they had to decide, how do we make that happen? What does that look like? Where does that 10% go? And the idea that came up that stuck, that they got really excited about and decided to go with, is that they decided to give every active member of the church, which, like I said before, was a little more than 300 people. They decided they were going to write $500 checks. Wow. And they were going to designate a Sunday morning. And when everyone showed up, unbeknownst to them, they were going to leave with a $500 check. Wow. And they were excited and nervous. They didn't know how that was going to be received. They were hoping that everyone would be excited, but they were a little worried that people would think they were mismanaging the money in some way. And there were a lot of discussions too about how do we tell people to use that $500? Do we put stipulations on it, or do we encourage anything? And so what they decided was just to say this is 10% of the money to go out and do God's work. And as someone who has regularly contributed to this ministry and is part of the reason that we have received this windfall, we are leaving it up to you to decide what is yours to do as God's work with this $500. And so that's what they did. They had the congregation come in. They announced $500 checks were being given. And the authors state that the initial response was complete silence in the sanctuary. And that's when the board kind of had a moment of, oh no, they hate this idea. And then apparently joy erupted when it really sunk in what they were being asked to do. And, they pointed out this was a congregation that was no stranger to helping each other out. Like I said, they had multiple programs. The book goes into detail about some of the different programs they had going on. And they were funded by people within the church, or they were constantly finding creative ways to support those projects, providing meals for people or help with clothing for job interviews. They had a lot of stuff going on. And so that's where the board felt like, these people, they will go out and do far greater things with their $500 than we could do by just donating a lump sum somewhere. And so that's what happened. And so some really cool things were done by the congregants with their $500. They talk about, there was a woman, Jane, who had just a few weeks prior to receiving the check, she had learned about a ministry in Northern Africa, where they were helping, local Christians were trying to share the gospel. And like I said, a lot of this was more traditional Christianity here. And so she used her $500. She sent it over to buy Bibles and other supplies for those individuals working in that area. And talking about, she had learned of this ministry and thought, oh, I would really love to help, but I don't know what I would be able to do right now. And so immediately when she got her $500 check, she knew that was her way to support that ministry that had been on her mind for weeks. There was another man, David, and he had a hugging ministry that he did on the side. So he was a free hugger person that really enjoyed going out and interacting with people on a personal level and doing those hugs. And so what he did was he didn't want to just give the $500 and then it was gone. And so what he did was decide that he was going to use his $500 to take people out for coffee and sit and have a conversation and just listen to what was going on in their lives and increase personal connection. And so he spent months using his $500 to take people out to coffee and build relationship. There was a man named Dan who also felt like he didn't just want to donate his money and not see what was happening. And so he decided he was going to give his out $20 at a time. And he would just carry some with him and look for people who he thought might be able to, use a little uplift of just having $20 handed to them, or he would pay for something for them. And he was able to spread his out that way, and he got to do the work directly and experience the joy with the people. And that's what he wanted to do. And so they just talked about that, all of Lasalle's congregants did, wonderful things. They also did things like restocked the shelves of their pantry. Some people turned around and gave the $500 right back to programs that already existed within the church. And many of them expressed that they had been wanting to contribute to those programs, but were feeling like their own money was a little bit tight. And so this $500 gave them the chance to just feel like, whoo, I just gave $500 to this program that I really like. And what they found too was an interesting thing, that as people were giving that $500 out and thinking about ways to make that $500 have the biggest impact, they started seeing an increase in people volunteering their time and energy within the church. They started seeing more and more generous acts. People were talking about all of the things that was being done with that money, getting excited about new projects that they might like to start. And they were realizing how amazing it felt to be able to give. And so they were really doing just a lot of things. And so they said, by receiving, they were reframing their resources as well. And so it says the dollars that they gave through the Love Let Go program started to look really similar to the dollars that were already sitting in their wallet or the dollars that were already sitting in their bank account. And so they started dreaming about what could be done with that other little extra that they might have, or how regular giving in this way was such a boost to their joy. And so many really started making plans for how they could do more of that. And they said ultimately what they really discovered is that they had enough. And that's what we know here at Unity, right? That there is always more than enough. And so they go on to talk about some things about generosity. And so generosity is the belief that we have something of value to give to others and that we can give it freely and easily. And so to really be in that generous spirit, we have to be tapped into that knowing that we are taken care of and there is more than enough and there's abundance all around us and that we can freely give. And that's where the joy comes, is knowing that we can do that and bring someone else joy, and then it kind of sets off a chain reaction. There was also some research done where Smith and Davidson, they were identifying some desirable qualities to which generosity was positively linked. And in their study, they found that generous people are more likely to be happier in their life. They're also more likely to be healthier. They are also less likely to be depressed, and they're more likely to live with a deep sense of purpose because they're feeling that connection to others as they send their energy out into the world. There was also a study done at the Harvard Business School and the University of British Columbia, where they narrowed their focus simply to financial generosity. And what they found is that, that people didn't have to give, a lot, but if they were regularly giving in a financial way, they were more successful in other areas of their life. So what they did is they gave some money to some sports teams, sales teams, and then some randomly chosen individuals. And what they found is, so they gave one group the money and they said, use it whatever you want. Just here's some money and do whatever you feel like you want to do with it. The other group was given the freedom to spend the money however they wanted, as long as they spent it on someone else. So they couldn't personally benefit from the money. And what they found repeatedly from running this study was that the people who had been given the money and told to share it with someone else were the salespeople were making more sales and were increasing their own income through their work. The sports team were winning 25% more of their games than the teams that had been given the money but not been told that they had to spend it on someone else. And the groups that were just the random people, all of them, when they were asked, they were reporting that they were happier, that they felt closer in their relationships, and they felt more satisfied with life in general. And that this seemed to be stronger when they were giving to people that they didn't even know, when they could do those random acts of kindness, or they could support programs where they might never see the face of the person they helped, but they knew that the money was going to help. They were reporting even higher levels of happiness and healthy relationships. So there also was, it says in 136 countries from around the world between 2006 and 2008, they had 200,000 respondents complete a survey relating to generosity and their satisfaction with life. And in 120 of those 136 countries, respondents who regularly gave financially to some cause reported higher levels of happiness and higher levels of satisfaction with their relationships. They also found that households that regularly donated to charities had a way, they would see increases in their household income and also reporting higher levels of happiness. So then they go and say, just because we're hardwired for generosity, like we are source, we are abundance, we know this truth, but we sometimes forget it in a moment, or we don't feel it when we're seeing what's right in front of us. It doesn't look like that's true sometimes. And so they're saying just because we're hardwired for it doesn't mean it's easy. And that we do live in a culture where we're kind of, scarcity is kind of put in the forefront of our minds a lot. There's a lot of messages of scarcity that we see, and it really hinders our ability to see the world from a vantage point of generosity at times. And that when we really are sitting in that generosity, it gives us the freedom and the perspective to see that truth and to be able to go out and do greater things. And it really, they talk about the act of giving disarms the power that objects to that abundance within us. So every time we give, we are knocking down those thoughts of scarcity, and we're knocking down those false beliefs that we have that there's not enough. And so that can be really powerful. And it talks about, with that scarcity mindset, we have like all of these cultural sayings that really teach us to think about scarcity, right? So money doesn't grow on trees. You got to tighten your belts. We need to stretch every dollar. A penny saved is a penny earned. Like we have all of these things that really are embedded in our culture that make us think that scarcity is at every turn. We're just always waiting for the scarcity to manifest instead of that abundance. So it just reminds us that our first framing story of generosity is God, Spirit, whatever you want to call, and that there was enough for the earth to flourish, for people to prosper. We were invited to take part in a very good world. The world is good, and we are of that world, and that there's all the stories in the Old and New Testament. There's many stories about Jesus and God pushing us to experience the fullness and abundance of this world. And so always going back to that. There was another cool story in here about a missionary that got to work with Mother Teresa in Calcutta, India, and said that one of the best examples of God's economy of abundance came from a homeless 8-year-old boy that he encountered. And he said every week they would throw a party for the street kids. These kids were 8 to 10 years old, and they were all homeless. They had been left without family. They spent their days begging to survive on the streets. And each Tuesday they would get about 100 of them together and try to throw a party, and they would play games, and they would eat together as a community. And one week, one of the kids that this person had grown close to said that it was his birthday. And so this gentleman bought him an ice cream cone. And he said he was so excited, he just stared at it, mesmerized for a few moments. And he started to realize he had no idea how long this had it been since this child had had an ice cream, or had he ever had ice cream. And he said what he did next was brilliant. He yelled at all of the other kids that were present that evening. He lined them up, and he went down the line and had each child lick the ice cream. And he said it was done with complete joy and without guilt or shame. He said it was the idea, his instinct was, this is so good, I can't keep it just to myself. I have to share this joy with everyone. And that it's about realizing the good things in life, like ice cream, are too good to keep for ourselves. Like there's the joy in the sharing it. There's also social contagion theory that says one person's behavior in a single interaction extends beyond the two people that are initially involved. And when it comes to generosity, one act of giving will ripple out 3 times the degree of separation from that person. So think of every act of kindness, every act of generosity, and it's rippled out, 3 times the degree of separation out into the world. So your act of kindness today could cause me to do something generous, which in turn will inspire an act of kindness by another person's part, and we just can keep that energy traveling out into the world. And witnessing a generous act of just one person makes the world bigger somehow, and it connects us all. And what happens is possibilities start to emerge. We find in one small act and one small story that there's a larger community at play. There's a larger connection or story at play. And so reading through this, it just really, it is a message of the power of generosity. And it just really, of course, as your board president, I bring it back to this ministry and what we are capable of and what we have the power to do. And I just got really excited thinking about the ripples that we could create together. And I wanted you guys to know that we, at the board retreat this year, we recommitted to giving to support Unity Worldwide Ministries, who was so incredibly supportive of us through the whole pandemic and making sure we had what we needed, providing resources to Sue and Dee so that we could keep things going. And also the Council of Churches who do things, that is a group that does a lot of really great things here in our own community. And what had happened is, we had gotten to a place within our budget where we were questioning, there was questions of scarcity, I think, there. Some of that happened before I was around, but it's kind of been there. And so what we talked about at the retreat is that we don't want to that's not living by principle. That's not us living by principle in our own ministry. And so we wanted to start sending that energy out. You guys bless us and things bless us with the resources and the more than enough to do what needs to be done here. And we wanted to make sure we were sending some of that out. And so I felt this challenge or calling not only to myself, but just to find ways that we can get outside of the walls of this church more fully and be creating those relationships and connections within our community and becoming, we want to be known in this community as a church that is getting out there and doing good works and being generous with our time, talent, and treasure and all of those things. So remembering that we know that we're energy and that energy only magnifies and grows as we share it with like energy, and as we pull more and more of that energy towards us, we can do greater and bigger things. And just hoping that we'll stay focused on our abundant nature and that we can join together and create something wonderful, not only in our community, but in the world as it goes out further. So that is that. We're running a little behind because I had troubles here, but so want to move into some announcements. So we'll be returning fully to in-person classes next Sunday. But this was a great test run of what we had going on. I'm excited that people are excited to be back with us in person. I hope some of you will consider joining in person, but we will also love to have you online as well. And next week, James Masters is going to be sharing about Ho'oponopono. Hope I said that correctly. I always struggle with that one. And reminder that the cornhole and karaoke will be on Saturday, June 5th from 3 to 8. Now you can attend and socialize and buy some food and just sit around, sing some karaoke. That there's no charge other than the food that you choose to purchase. If you want to actually participate in the tournament, it's a 2-person team and the cost is $20 per team. And let me tell you, Lisa's been working on some cornhole boards and she's getting the whole thing together. I've got you covered on the karaoke, so it's going to be a fun time. There are going to be medals for first, second, and third place winners. And then the very next weekend, we have the annual yard sale on June 11th and 12th. We're still looking for those quality items to make the sale a success. You can contact the church or Mary Hilzebeth Huber for more information. And then a reminder that our ministry, and I mean our ministry, so this ministry belongs to each and every one of us. It depends on the support, not only in our time and talent, but also in our treasure. And so if you feel called to financially support the mission of Unity of Springfield, remember you can do so in a variety of ways. You can download the Tithely app. You can donate through PayPal. You can put a check in the mail. You can attend in person now and drop a check or money in the basket. So that's our announcements for this week. In closing, let's once again center and take a deep breath. Close your eyes if you so choose. And we say thank you for the abundance of the universe and our giving spirits. We know that there is always more than enough, and God is good all the time. Amen. Thank you, guys. Thank you for everyone at home who joined. I see Leanne, Teresa, James, Peggy, Pamela, Susan. We're so grateful to have all of you with us.